Good morning, colleagues. Sanibonani. Ninjani. Nhlaleleni ngemuva. If I may ask those of us who are seated in the last couple of tables to please join some tables at the front. There are plenty of spaces. Please join us at the front. Okay, just the two of you. There are tables on the right and left-hand side, please. Mr. Bola and your team, there are plenty of spaces. My friend from the MK, please join the seats at the front.
Apologize that I could not be there in person. It was my intention to be there, but unfortunately Parliament is in session, and since I chair the Standing Committee on Public Accounts, I am generally unable to leave it unattended to travel between Tuesday and Thursday. So please accept my apologies for not being there today. I appreciate the privilege of nonetheless being able to provide a video contribution to the conference, and I hope that you will find it valuable. I have been asked to speak on accountability, a topic on which I wish to make about 6 points. The first point I want to make is that culture is everything: capability, openness, and therefore accountability. The best laws on the planet cannot protect you against bad culture, against bad intentions, against a culture that generally does not respect the South African people. It does not respect voters, and public representatives and public servants believe that the public institutions they oversee are there for them to do whatever they wish. Our system is premised on a significant amount of goodwill. What does that mean? That means you get good men and women who care about the public purse, who care about the well-being of the South African people, and are going to do the work with diligence. That when there are mistakes or faults in the system, that they will take them seriously and that they will do something about them. Unfortunately, over the last 10 to 15 years, we have seen an erosion of that culture from what we had in the first 10 years of democracy, I would say, where public representatives no longer have the same spirit. The best laws in the country and the best laws in the world, unfortunately, cannot protect us from those tendencies. In order for laws to work, it is important that the people charged with implementing them implement them to the best of their ability. I have had instances, whether it is in radio interviews or TV interviews, where people say the Constitution is not doing what it's supposed to do. The Public Finance Management Act is not doing what it's supposed to do. The Municipal Finance Management Act is not doing what it's supposed to do. I hear all of that, but laws need people to implement. And the political culture and the social culture that the people are supposed to interpret and implement those laws, accept and internalize, is going to be reflected in whether they are then able or willing to implement the laws as they should. South Africa has got really good laws. We have laws for every sphere of government. We have laws for every possibility. But we often fail on the implementation because the political culture does not take these laws seriously. So culture is really, really important. The second thing I want to talk about is that skills and experience matter for politicians and professional public servants. It is very important, I believe, that even if someone is providing political oversight, in other words, they're an MMC, they're an MEC, or they're a minister, they have some level of understanding of that which they oversee. Why is this important? This is important so that the MMC or the MEC or the minister cannot be hoodwinked by somebody who knows better, who can use complicated language, who can use trickery, especially in the areas of engineering and finance, in order to give a false picture, in order to mislead not only the political principal, but also members of the public. This is a very sensitive issue because we live in a democracy, and all of us are elected on the basis of popularity. But I also want to urge that part of the job that we have to do in developing our democracy is to make sure that in the area of politics, we apply the same level of rigor and concern that we do in terms of whether the teacher who's teaching our children is fit to be a teacher, whether the mathematics teacher knows anything about mathematics at all, or science, or geography, or history, and so on. We need to adopt the same level of care and seriousness that we apply when it comes to our children, whether it is about schooling, whether it is about healthcare. None of us would want a teacher to pose as a doctor in order to provide healthcare to our children. We do not want somebody who is a policeman posing as a nurse. We also don't want a nurse who's going to claim that they can be a detective. This does not mean that people must have the same professional qualifications as those they oversee. But it is very important that those who place in positions of responsibility have a certain level of knowledge, have a certain level of experience, so that between the professionals and the elected representatives, you can have the checks and balances that you need in order to make sure that the work of the South African people is done properly. The third thing that I want to speak to is that systems are very important. These are governance systems, IT systems, legislative systems, and so on. There is not a single part of governing that works in isolation. What does this mean? It means the processes that have been put in place to make sure that governance happens, and it happens in the manner that it should, are there for a reason, but they don't work in isolation. For example, it is futile to have a proper procurement system without the prerequisite IT systems to back it up. There are people who talk about blockchain, for instance, where it is possible to track the entire development of a tender, to track the scoring and so on, and everybody can see that it is transparent. Hopefully one day we will have a situation where that notorious famous tender box at a municipality where people go and drop their tender documents is no longer an issue. People can upload the documents from home in the same way that those who study by correspondence with UNISA and other institutions are able to do, and you are able to track the development of your application. Part of the system of accountability is transparency, and anything that is done behind closed doors, it provides greater opportunity for people to try and crook the system. But if things are done more and more in the open, there is less opportunity. And the South African people will begin to have confidence that when decisions are taken, even controversial decisions, they are taken for the right reasons by people acting in good faith, who are adequately qualified to make those assessments, and that the information they used, the information they obtained has been used properly and for good reason within the rules that we have. The second thing I want to say on this about systems is that we cannot try and fix a procurement problem if the finance department also has got weaknesses in it. So it is very important that we try and make sure that the entire system works, so that we not fix one thing and then we have things breaking down in another area that is related. The fourth thing I want to say is that the public are the ultimate guardians. As chairperson of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts in Parliament, people either will say, nothing that you do will make a difference, or they will say, what difference can you make? Now, what I want to say, part of the role of Parliament, and it is the same from the provincial sphere, it is the same for municipalities. The most important thing in a democracy is that the people get to know what is going on. They get to know what decisions are being taken. the reasons for which those decisions are taken, and the impact of those decisions on the South African people. That is why it is important that we run and we oversee and we build a transparent system of government so that the South African people always know what is going on. This is so they can exercise proper political choices at election time. But it is also so that they can exercise proper political choices between elections. For instance, people may decide to protest, people may decide to mobilize and sign a petition, and so on. It is not possible to do all of those things if information is hidden. But the point I want to make is that no democracy with low levels of citizen participation succeeds. It is very important that the South African people, on an ongoing basis, form part of government systems, government processes, government decisions, that when there are green papers and white papers and consultations and all of these things, that the South African people are there. And the only way we can do that is if there is transparency in the system. The fifth thing I want to say is building a culture of public participation all the time. There have been instances in the case of the National Assembly in years gone by where the courts have sent a law back to Parliament and instructed Parliament to conduct proper public participation. But I want to say also that it is not just Parliament and legislatures and councils that are a problem. We also generally have a culture where people do not participate in public processes. I am a parent, I have children, and I also know that in the case of school governing bodies, many parents opt out of the opportunity and obligation to be part of a school governing body. Democracy applies at all levels and at all spheres, and it is so important that we participate in ward committees, in community policing forums, and so on. I often tell people that democracy is like a stock firm. All of us need to put something in so that we can get something out. It is negligent for anyone to leave everything to public representatives, to leave everything to public servants. The ultimate supervisors are the South African people, and a culture of constant participation in government processes is really, really important in order to fortify and help us from some of the problems that we've seen. The sixth thing I want to talk about is that municipal oversight is very important. Every business is in a municipality. Every home is in a municipality. Every school is in a municipality. Every clinic is in a municipality. It is not possible to advance the kind of development that we say we want for our society, for our country, if municipalities are in disarray. The multiple warnings by the Auditor General to say governance is falling apart, municipal finances are falling apart, mean that there is a very direct and material impact on the South African people. People like you and I, people like my mother, our sick grandparents, sick children, and so on. So, to me, municipalities are the most important sphere of government that we must all protect, that we must participate in these processes jealously, so that we are able to have the kind of outcomes that we get, that we want, not for ourselves, not just for ourselves and our families, but for our communities as well. I want to say, as I conclude, this is a very rich conversation that potentially that you will have today. If I can leave you with one thing, it is to say that there is no magic bullet. There is no magic solution. It is a whole raft of things. The first thing that all of us have to do when we vote is to exercise the right political choice, to be stingy with our votes, and to think very carefully who we vote for, and vote for men and women of goodwill with a proven track record, who are going to do what the South African people deserve. That is very, very important. The second thing is I want to urge all of you to ask your neighbors, your friends, your family members to get into the culture of participating in public processes. We will not be able to save ourselves and save our democracy if we do not do so. The third and last thing that I want to say is that let us have this conversation with open hearts, with an open attitude, so that at the end of the day, we are able to convince one another as to what the right path to take is. In 2026, we will have the local government elections. By the time we get to those elections, two things should happen. The first is that through public participation and by also insisting on proper systems at local government level and at every other level of government, we will begin to be forward-looking in the reasons for which we vote for South Africa's representatives. In other words, we vote on the basis of the development and welfare plans that are being placed on the table, the service delivery plans that are being placed on the table, and not on the basis of fear that once again public representatives are going to let us down. Now, I know that many of you are not public representatives, but what is particularly important is political education. It is civic education. It is not possible, I don't believe, to bring a lot more people into public participation if they do not understand how our system works. Personally, I do everything I can to explain how things work in Parliament, why decisions get taken in the manner in which they do, and to say what the role of the South African people is. The final thing that I want to say on this is that it is very important that we do not lose hope. There are many things that are going wrong, but like I said, democracy is like a stock fair. It is our stock fair. It is like being on a ship that is sailing in rough seas. We cannot jump ship because we will sink ourselves, but we cannot let it go about at sea without any direction, because ultimately, where it ends up is going to affect all of us. I wish you all the best in your deliberations today, and once again, I am sorry that I could not join you today, and look forward to joining you in the future. I thank you.
Thank you very much. My KPIs have been achieved. That was a significant hurdle to try and cross over. You know when technology doesn't want to play with you, so. All right. We expect a certain quality of delivery from ourselves as a team here at DDP, so we hope that we can achieve that every time we gather together. But beyond that, I think it was important, the sentiments that were shared by Usogezo, and of course, Honorable Usogezo now. I can't just, protocol. I can't just call him anyhow, so I'd like to welcome, for the purposes of the panel, I'll invite each of the individual speakers on their own. Once they're done with the presentation, can then grab a seat here. But I'll start with Tamsin Hudson from PlanAct, an organization based in Johannesburg, but working across South Africa. She's a program manager there, and she'll be speaking to us about the role and impact of municipal account committees, impacts. A round of applause for her, please.
I also just want to recognize the board chair and the representatives from the Auditor General's office and all the esteemed guests. Thank you so much. And it's always wonderful to be in Durban, of course. So, I'm going to just start off by talking about local government, which is the topic. Which is the topic of the conversation today. And I think it's probably tried to say it, but local government is absolutely vital in the lives of South African citizens. But I think also so much is placed within the mandate of local government. And so it's not only only just services and delivery in terms of water sanitation, solid waste management, but there's also an enormous responsibility in terms of land and land planning, housing, and so there are, as I said, a series of demands placed on this arm of government, but yet it is also one that suffers from serious capacity concerns. So I think that is something to consider. We also recognize that the Auditor General's latest report speaks of just a very small number of disclaimed audits declining. And so this is really not something, as she mentioned, to celebrate, but it's actually a cause of deep concern. And action has been slow. And we talk about the lived realities of people and ordinary South Africans who don't see their lives improving. And this has deep implications for the vitality of our democracy. Just going to go to the next slide. I'm pointing in the right direction. Sorry. Sorry. What we're seeing is really a lack of transparency and accountability and institutional integrity. So those municipalities that still struggle to get out of their disclaimed space really suffer from these particular ailments. And this is leading to serious blockages in the delivery of services. And so it leads to deep harm, and of course the Auditor General has reflected on this. And from our perspective as Plan Act, we place a strong emphasis on social justice and of course equality in a country of such deep inequalities. So these service delivery issues really impact the lives of people and really affect their quality of lives in very serious ways. So just talking about accountability, I just wanted to mention a few points around this, but it is a cornerstone of good governance. And, you know, we have, as is often referred to, one of the most progressive constitutions. And the Constitution speaks directly, there's an entire chapter dedicated to local government. And again, this is directed at ensuring strong local government performance, which means that it really needs to budget, plan, and administer public resources in responsible ways to promote social economic development of the community. And so I think at this point it's important to recognize the strong role local government has in development. It really is a development agency in many ways, and it should be considered perhaps more effectively in that light, that when it doesn't perform, the country's development really is at stake. Section 1, and our previous speaker, the scope chair, spoke about elections, and ours is a representative democracy, multi-party system that is designed to ensure accountability, responsiveness, and openness. And I would argue that accountability is deeply entrenched in our democratic enterprise. But the problem is that what we see now, and in fact, in a recent report by the Good Governance Africa, they are reflecting on this coalition politics and the role that is playing now in perhaps in some ways facilitating patronage politics, because we've seen in the city of Joburg, we've seen it in the city of Tshwane, deep instances of positions for, as opposed to, and one hopes it's not positions in power, but actually positions in power for service delivery. But we wait to see. But I think it's also just the last point on this slide is just to recognize that public accountability is about the public domain, and it is because our resources and the resources that are managed by municipalities are public resources. They've been raised through taxes of all different forms, direct and indirect taxation systems and resources. And so these actually, the outcomes of this expenditure should be available to the public. So, let me just move to the next slide. Then I just wanted to make a point about the social contract. And I think, Dr. Davey, I think you mentioned this very strongly in your presentation, about how important it is for accountability, which is really at the core of our social contract, which is very fragile. And from our very contested and troubled history, this remains a deep challenge, and so something that we certainly need to reflect on. And I think there are just three things that citizens really look to when it comes to government and local government as well, is well-performing administrations characterized by reliable service delivery, institutions that are reliable, that are effective in attaining public outcomes, and then that function fairly and impartially. I think that is something that is certainly a standard in the law, which is fairness. This concept is deeply entrenched. And I think, again, our previous speaker also reflected on the power and importance of institutions. But institutions require strong leaders. It requires a culture of performance management and consequence management, as the Auditor General's representative spoke about. So, just about coming now more to the impact section. So the council and the impacts, the municipal public accounts committees do have a significant role to play. And their role is really around investigating and dealing with what is often unauthorized, irregular, fruitless, and wasteful expenditure. The instances of fraud and corruption that are very important to be overseen and identified and addressed. And then there's transgressions and non-performance by municipal managers, as is well documented, which we know about. The accountability processes. Interestingly, these processes actually reside within councils. So it's councils that must take responsibility and much stronger performance for these accountability processes to be instituted and to be protected and strengthened. And impact must monitor and ensure that the annual report is delivered. The annual report follows the Auditor General's report, and it is absolutely incumbent on the municipal public committees, accountability committees, to ensure that the findings that are in the Auditor General's report are actually addressed and that they are not repeated. So where those issues that have been identified, they need to be addressed, and the requisite remedies need to be in place. And I think that is something that really needs a stronger focus, because what we are seeing is a very much stagnant situation, or very little movement. And this is of deep concern. So, of course, the impacts must look at the Auditor General's report. Sorry, I don't know, I just there. And certainly monitor the effectiveness of the audit committees. Now, the audit committees, I think, are also a body where perhaps insufficient attention is paid to. So the impact must also monitor instances of disciplinary action, and we know that this is a deep area of concern. And what you tend to have, and we know this from our engagements with the Steve Chwete local municipality, Emanasheni, and others, that what you're finding is a lot of recycling. I think Mrs. Vatha mentioned this as well. And this is another area of concern. People resign before the disciplinary proceedings have concluded, etc. So that is something that the impacts really need to also focus on. Let me just make sure I go to the right. Yeah, here we go. So the impacts are established in terms of Section 79A of the Municipal Structures Amendment Act of 2021, And they are designed to assist the Council in its oversight role of the executive and administration. And in terms of this, it is incumbent on municipalities to establish municipal public accounts committees. It's really a requirement. And so the councils determine the functions of those impacts, and it is clearly an instrument of the council. It's not just a creature of the council, but it certainly is an instrument. And it really, at its core, it's designed to provide independent oversight of internal financial control, risk management and performance, and governance. So it performs a similar function in many ways to the scopers, the standing committees on public accounts in the national and provincial legislatures. But one of its key functions, again, is that annual report, which is so significant. So just to say that there's a great potential to actually harness both the impacts and the audit committees. And this is something that we believe is something that will help the council and the role of the legislature to hold the executive. These are strong bodies to ensure effective and efficient use of municipal resources. And the scope analogy is correct, because it is about protecting the public purse. It is about protecting public resources. And so that needs to be, that role really needs to be strengthened. So harnessing both audit committees and impacts together could improve the effectiveness of accountability. And they can certainly be audit committees. They are independent bodies. They are not made up of members of the council. And they therefore also have a role to play in engaging with civil society. And we've talked about this in previous settings. And basically holding their own information events and strengthening their inputs into those council annual reports through their engagement with local government, local players and civil society. And then also the impact should continue the scope of tradition of appointing opposition councillors. This is not always the case, but we do believe that this would strengthen the impacts. There is a serious concern about the impacts in that many of the councillors that make up those impacts, which are normally about 10 members, may often be members of the ruling party. And so one has to question to what extent are they in fact independent. And that is certainly something that we are deeply concerned about. But the impacts should work closely with these audit committees so that the annual report becomes a meaningful exercise through public participation channels and greater roles for civil society. And then just some, so there are concerns again with the impacts that they're not sufficiently capacitated and equipped to deal with irregular expenditure and investigations. So I think this again speaks to the importance of training, upskilling, and capacitating these bodies so that they can play the role that is envisaged for them. So the other concern is to what extent are they being supported in local government by municipal managers and the mayoral committees, etc. And then SALGA also has a role to play, certainly in helping to strengthen the impacts and the municipal public and the municipal councils more generally. So training on investigating and irregular expenditure is vitally important. And I think these are, and then adhering to legislative requirements, and I think these are technical areas that one should not really just treat as simple issues. There's a whole series of important legislation that surrounds the management of local government institutions, and of course to what extent are people financially literate has to be raised. Just turning to public participation, the MFMA, the Municipal Finance Management Act, is quite prescriptive over contracts where they extend beyond 3 years to require that the public be involved in those types of big, larger scale projects. And so basically the other aspect that we want to emphasize is that professional oversight and audit bodies very often look at the problem and analyze the problem. But to what extent are they actually leveraging the skills that reside in civil society and community oversight, which can directly engage the issue and apply pressure to reduce such abuses? Just as an example, a number of civil society organizations, NGOs like ourselves, also conduct what are known as social audits. And these social audits are very robust in the sense that tender documents are often obtained, a particular issue is identified to focus on. For instance, we've just run a social audit in Emalafeni, in Mpumalanga, on water. And so if one is successful in obtaining all the documents, what was said to be expended, what was said to be implemented, and what was procured, that can all be determined by communities. And so on the ground, what actually has been delivered? Is it in line with what is said in documents? And so I think that is something that one can also consider. And the role of data is quite phenomenal. The amount of really granular data that can be provided by civil society is quite impressive. So I think let's just move along a little bit. Sorry, I'm taking a lot of time. So I think, again, just going back to the financial literacy and professional competency, these are serious problems and they need attention. But we need to arrive at a point where the municipality's annual reports match the service experience of ordinary citizens. And I think that will be a key litmus test. And one needs to ensure that civil society can use the statutory instruments of the audit process, principally audit committees and the impacts to leverage improved public accountability. So I'm getting to the end. So what we call for is that there should be a greater role for community action. And this can be done in various ways. We also feel that in many instances the councils are not very well equipped to engage with communities. And so that role also needs to be strengthened. But there is a deep mistrust of municipal priorities, and there's a need to rebuild a sense of trust in municipal structures and systems that should guarantee public accountability. What is a deep concern is that communities are not sufficiently aware of the impacts. They're not sufficiently aware of when they meet. The information and the way these impact meetings are advertised is often beset with issues. How effectively is that done? Because what we see, and we've been to a few impacts, is very low to almost no public participation. And so this is really an issue of concern. But we do believe that there is a role to play. Public awareness, also strengthening communities' awareness of these mechanisms and their role and they should be playing. So I'm just going to jump to the last two bits. So from our work in the Steve Tshwete local municipality, the challenges that they've identified are implementation and tracking of impact resolutions. So this is another issue of record keeping and managing those decisions. And then sustainable attendance, as I mentioned, of impact meetings by members of not only the public, but the mayoral committees and management. And then the timeliness response to impact queries by the mayoral committees is an issue. And
And then there's an unsystematic referral to matters too impactful for interrogation. But there is a potential. These bodies do exist, and the challenge now is to capacitate them and build them up so that they can be those accountability instruments that then, of course, can guarantee greater oversight and greater effectiveness. And then just lastly, I think this was really picked up by the Auditor General in her latest report. And alarmingly and concerningly, it's only 37% of impacts are effective. And so I think that is something that we really need to reflect on, because they're certainly not playing the role that they should be. And so there's a massive gap here. And to some extent, they're almost not performing at all. So I think that is something that probably needs to be taken up by SALGA, by COGTA, and addressed. So we know there's poor service delivery. We know that there's a culture that tolerates transgression, non-performance, weak leadership, and then deviations from procurement processes, vacancies, which are a deep concern, and then adequate consequence management is something that is not in place. And so finally, just to shift the culture of local government to one characterized by accountability and transparency, and to restore the confidence of people in their government. Just a final word is just to say that what we do know is that to the extent that services are being delivered indicates the strength of our democracy. And so what we're actually finding is very low levels of voter participation, low levels of participation in democracy. And to the extent that services are a problem, that results a deep change. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
As well, Ms. Polisa Julie, who is a facilitator, a legal scholar, who's going to be talking to us about the role of civil society on behalf of our network of active civil society organizations who are involved in the space of learning about public accountability and local government in particular. And then, of course, we have Mr. Mafa from the Ranyaka Community Transformation, not Trust anymore. And so he's going to be talking to us about local economic development. But I'll ask them all to please join us on stage so that we can make it a bit more discursive.
Yes.
I think that's the English, discursive. All right, so Oliswa, on your part, in terms of the stuff that you've been able to glean from the presentation of the Auditor General's office, as well as the work that you've done in collaboration with DDP as part of the Local Government Action and Learning Network, where would you place us as civil society in terms of our responsibility going forward?
Good morning, colleagues, and thank you, Brian, for that. As said, my name is Oliswa Chubili. I am a DDP associate, and it's lovely to see the faces that we've worked with during the year. I'm hoping we'll get time to catch up on the success that you guys have been experiencing in different communities. Now, civil society plays a very important role. Local government is the one sphere that is closest to the people, right? And it is the sphere, again, that citizens can use to engage in public participation. We see that happen a lot in local government. Now, with our role as the local government advocacy and network, we focused on three things: to inform, to educate, and to also create awareness, because we believe in order for us to participate in whatever decisions are being taken about our country or our communities, we need to know what's going on. And there was that lack of knowledge. People realize that our citizens, our CSOs really want to comment, but they don't know. They don't know what bills are being commented on or how to write specific comments. They do have comments they want to share. They have submissions they want to share, but they don't know where to go and what to do with regards to their the comments they want to share. And that's where the importance of educating comes in. Basically, from the simple structures that are there as to who do you communicate with when you want to share a certain thought or feeling about something. And also how to draft, how to compose whatever it is that you want to say. Now, civil society plays a very important role, as one of the speakers mentioned. Civil society pulls up and pulls through for citizens whenever government messes up. So it is civil society that pulls in and assists, be it service delivery, be it awareness and education. It is civil society that pulls through most of the time.
Yeah. Before you conclude, I think I want to ask Andile parts of his thoughts as well. I'm sorry for interrupting you. So on the subject of what civil society has been able to do in the past, we saw your organization in particular leading the charge in responding to the flood situation that we had in 2021, as well as just the remnants of the lack of access to housing, lack of access to food and sustenance for people who were displaced as a result of the climate change situation. How do you contextualize that in the space of public participation and civil society engagement?
Can you hear me, right?
Yes, you can.
Greetings, my name is Andile from Ranyama Community Transformation. We're your next door neighbor, essentially. We know what you are doing. That's the idea. We know what you are doing if you want to think of us. Look, there were a number of learnings, I first must say. One, I used to not work for government before I came to the space, so I wasn't used to how government works. Though I used to work for an SOE, but I didn't know how the other side of government works. So one of the things that we discovered as Ranyama, as a collective, was that government sometimes do not know what they're doing, or they don't know the people. There's no effort by those who may represent government, either as councillor or official from the municipality or government, to at least be interested to know. You know, if ever I'm tasked with cooking in my house, I must be interested that there is pots, so there is an element of, they want to cook, but they don't even care if grocery was done. So they show up, and they are surprised like us that there's no food. So that's one of the things we basically, it's almost like people don't think, but they show up. And then, so that's another gap we discover about government, that sometimes I'm irritated by my friends who are in government.
Yeah.
When we're in school, you used to think very well. Somehow when we went there, you stopped thinking. So that's one. The second one was the opportunism in our community. Now I'm going to the beneficiaries now. There is a human problem in our community. It's just that all of us here, because we're all supermen, we want to solve the problems. We don't realize that one of the problems is the human problem. The problem that the people themselves are a problem. And sometimes we who try to help like civil society develop and how they relate with themselves, with their surroundings, and even when facing a problem. We found, I'll give you a typical example. During the floods, we found people who had food, taking advantage of the availability of food. Now, as a civic society organization or as an NGO working in the community, that shocks you because it's not a system, it's a government problem, it's your neighbor's problem. Your neighbor went out of their house. Something inside of them said, I must not eat my grocery, I must go eat that grocery. So it's another problem sometimes we don't have an appreciation of, even as the civil society supermen, part of us. We sometimes deny that there's a problem in the beneficiaries we're dealing with. And we need to find a solution to capacitate them so that they even understand how to relate with various engagements we bring to them. So that's part of the time I've devoted myself. All of this year, we shut down everything, every help. We're not helping anyone this year. We're going to each and every ward, every community, having real conversations with NGOs about themselves and their beneficiaries, and crafting a process of what can we do to deal with the problem of the human that we are dealing with, so that they can even sometimes engage what we are talking about properly.
Yeah.
Because they don't engage this because there is a problem. Then, the meeting is called, they don't show. The bin is not collected, they just stay indoors. Text. Not even one goes to the municipal WhatsApp and say, the bin was not collected today. The electricity went off. But there's a WhatsApp. It's not even a call now, you can just go on WhatsApp. So we must have an appreciation that there's a problem that is we're dealing with, it is a human one. And the school is not helping with dealing with it. Parents are not in place in townships at least. So there's that gap that we have to deal with, that there's no one who's doing the thing that we are thinking they are expected of a human being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you very much. Tamsin, if you can maybe give us a scope of how impacts are constituted. Before I go, how many of us in the room knew about impacts? Municipal public accounts committees. How many of us knew about them? So there's 3 people out of a room of probably about 70-ish people. Is this information being deliberately hidden from us, or is it a problem of the human problem that we ourselves are not taking accountability for our own governance?
So, in the case of the impacts, so as I mentioned, it's made up, it is a council committee. It is a mandatory committee. It is made up of 10 members. And it is essentially to oversee the leadership of the municipality, the administration, and the officials. So, as was noted, I mean, there's really poor levels of engagement and participation in this body. And that is of concern. And I think in many ways, Andile, it is what you say. But I think there's deeper issues around awareness. That is a big, big crisis. Because, for instance, when we spoke to the Steve Twete, the impact manager, or councillor, should I say, he actually just said that, well, it's in the newspapers. Now, how many people honestly buy a newspaper? I mean, I would love to be honest. I really would. I just don't anymore. And so I think there's a disconnect between how these bodies relate to their communities. And I think that is concerning. And so perhaps also there needs to be a different way of constituting them. Maybe they need to be in communities where people are. So I think those are the kinds of conversations that need to be had, and also the times that they meet. Perhaps it needs to be at evening times or on weekends, not during the week when people are busy or at work, even if you're taking care of your stores, you know. But just, I don't want to overtake, but there's an example.
Go for it.
I'll speak to Andile just quickly, because we've got a wonderful example. I'll be as quick as I can. We've been working with the City of Tshwane and with the City of Joburg, and we've constituted what is known as a hub. And the hub is made up of community members, so very often community facilitators, CFs, as well as, and then ourselves and partners. And what we've done is then we've actually identified the officials responsible for sanitation in Joburg and with solid waste management. And that's performing extremely well. So if you can coalesce around one issue, and what we started doing is building plans and strategies, so I can speak more, but that is
one tool that you've utilized.
What's prioritized and why? Because at the end of the day, we find that we have protest actions in wards and communities, and people are saying, why is there clearly being built when we need roads? But did you actually make a submission that for your ward you want a first or a road first? So it's informing people about how these decisions and how these meetings actually affect their communities. That would help.
I'm hearing some reverb from the room. The systems don't work, but we'll get to that just now. Under your undertaking, as you said, a mapping of Umlazi, specifically as a township, in terms of the CSO environment in particular. You work closely with area-based management. What's the scope and for local economic development? Parts of what we interface with when we talk to councillors, when you talk to local government in particular, is they say there's no money. People aren't paying their rates on time. We have the Westport Ratepayers Association rightfully taking certain stands on whether or not they'll be able to pay their rates, or saying they won't pay rates until certain services are delivered. But what's the scope for local economic development in order to generate more income for local municipalities in particular?
So I'm going to talk from the Rangara context. So we're using Umlazi like ground zero, where we're experimenting a number of things that we've not done in other nodes because of its nature. So one of the things that we're very convinced is from our research that there's money in township. If you think there's no money in township, you are lying. You can just stand in Mega City and count the number of new cars. Just count only the Chinese ones.
Oh, okay. Why the Chinese?
I'm saying,
no, I'm joking.
That's the most US. So
yeah. The new models, yes.
More Chinese. Just say, let's remove the myth that there is no money in the township, right? The exercise you make NGOs do is, by your area, count how many professionals who are driving a car that it makes its installment is 7,000 rand a month. And if you come back to us with that data, we will then write letters to those professionals to donate 100 rand to your cause a month, and we will ensure that you are able to issue them a Section 18A. So the idea that there is no money in the township is that when communities are organized, there is no economy that happen. I know most of you are organized by malls. We call them vacuum cleaners in Manyaka. You are organized around your malls, but no one cares to actually say, where is the Stokfela money in Umlazi being spent? And if we in Umlazi sit down in a conversation, where do we spend our money? People like professionals like us. I mean, typically, a professional earns an average of 25,000 to 20,000 in Umlazi. Where is the majority of their funds being spent? Now, there must be portals of those conversations for the economy of Umlazi to not just depend on the city, to not depend on the city, to depend on the professionals, the spenders, the ones who are spending money, who are asking, where are you spending the money? You are saying Umlazi is not going anywhere. Okay, let's see where is the energy that makes it move. Where do you take your energy? You discover the energy is spent in Klanga, in Pavilion, then you realize that the people who are culprits in the development of Umlazi are the very people who are saying there's no economy in Umlazi. So part of what Ranyama is doing then is to begin to encourage these conversations. That the councillor will invite them. Let's leave the councillor alone for now. We have the money. We are buying the cars. We are paying for the bonds. We are the ones who are going to benefit from whatever economy that's going to happen here. So how do we redirect where we buy meat? Everybody here, or everybody in class buys meat at one day. But everybody goes to Bluff. So the discussion is, how can we build a Umlazi-based butchery that is co-owned by the community? So if you buy meat there, you are buying from even your own entity. It's ambitious, I know, but we as Ranyama have created something called SHARE. SHARE is a PTY where we identify a business in the community that we can do together. Then the community owns 80%, we own 20%. Just as preference shares. So we still have controlling interest in terms of decisions, but in terms of the benefit, the community owns the majority of the benefit. So that's what we kind of came to, Brian, to say we need to make more time to organize money. Let's organize the money. Just one last point, Brian. We were taking the GDP, or the gross income of churches in Chatsworth on a Sunday in a month. Just imagine how much it is. I'm just talking about one segment. I'm just talking about church. I'm not even talking about Hindu temples. I'm not talking about mosques. I'm just talking about churches.
That's for the Lord's work, not for...
No. Remember, we don't look at church as a religious entity. We look at it as a community entity that has funds that have been collected, that have funds that are part of this community, and we want to know how can we get a stakeholder to come to the table, and maybe they can give us 10 or 20% of what they collect for community initiatives that will drive the economy. So that's what we're looking at, Brian, because we realize that there's if we don't organize communities, we'll all be blaming the councillor, which, by the way, has not gone to school, never studied economics, and even the documents that they're reading about economics, they don't make sense. But they're sitting in the local economic development committee. So that's what we're kind of trying to deal with for now.
Yeah, thank you very much. Sorry if there's a councillor in the room. If there are any questions or comments directed at the panel or any of the discussions that we've had today, please do raise your hand and I'll point to you and you can engage with them. Yes, Begizenzo 1, 2, and then a third hand, 3. Okay, you can use that mic, Begizenzo, and then Masole Dalam. Oh, happened there, you better laugh. Yeah, there we go.
Greetings, everyone. Well, I think my first question will go to sorry, Oliswa, Julie. You spoke of civil society as the people who are supposed to be like making the government to account, who must be at the forefront. But I'm worried that also within the civil society sector, there are people who are also not accountable to themselves. How? Because also within civil society, we are able to cook reports. So how do we do that? We go take the names of people who write the report without making a real difference in the community or to the lives or the beneficiaries of the funding that we have gained to say we are going to deliver the service. So how do we hold these people accountable if ourselves we can't account, you know? And secondly, my brother, you know, it's very nice, like the things that you say you do at Umlas. But I'm afraid that the African professionals, they are feeding the values that are borrowed from the white elites. It would have been better if it was the values that are born at, like, so, if they invented so if they were the ones who implemented those values, it would have been better. Look at this, we'll be forever borrowing the values of white people. Like, what I'm trying to say is that the people who are driving these cars and who are not contributing to the community, also they are taking that economy or money they have, they are enriching other people because they don't buy in our local, in our local stores or whatever. So what is happening is that even we have worked hard, but in our community, we are only taking away from it. We do not invest. Because what we think is better, you should buy it in Umhlanga or Pavilion or wherever. But when somebody from your community is selling something you see as inferior, to say, I can't wear this because I'm a professional, right? So somehow, I think the system is meant to oppress us in one way or the other. Look at this. We are supposed to encourage the community to community participation. But when we have to go to school, the primary schools, we go to the public schools, there's like poor infrastructure. There are no laboratories, there's nothing, right? So if you want a better education, you have to go to private schools. When we say private schools, we are meaning the rich because they can pay for it. How do you expect someone with a poor education to make someone account with a very expensive education, because they can easily manipulate the system. So the elites, they don't say they are doing crime, they say they manipulate. It's only black people who do crime. So for them, they just manipulate the system.
All right.
But
as you learn, yes, my data, as you conclude.
Thank you. Okay, so now my worry is that we always, you know, when we want to go to the universities, they shoot at the people who are protesting free education, because that is where true freedom is, education. I can't be able to read this document that you are presenting here if I'm uneducated. Therefore, I can't be able to hold you accountable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You can go for it. Yeah.
Good day, everyone. My question, it's like a question or comment to Andy. I heard you saying that we must buy at our locals. But my question is, what do we benefit as our community members? Because the same locals that you're speaking about, we've got one the butchery that is always packed. We've got the exit, which is always packed by black people. It's black owned, but we don't benefit anything. We've got taxis that we travel every day. And when you go and approach those people just for a donation, you want to hold your workshop as a community member, it's very difficult. And please be reminded that those people don't live in our communities, they live as Komplana. So the money that we used to buy, they take it away from us. And I'm Mlazi. Unfortunately, I also come from Mlazi. So Mlazi, we've got our malls, which we buy in those malls. They are Truworths, Edgars, the Woolworths. What do we benefit in as the community of Mlazi? Nothing. Because those businesses are owned by some people who don't reside in our areas. So just some franchise. So how are you going to help us then, saying that we need to support them? We do support them, but at the end of the day, it's very demotivating because you support a person who doesn't support you, who has a luxury house at Mhlanga, and you're staying in that forum house at Mlazi, but you always, pensioners, they spend their cent to go and buy there, who earn nothing, who earn 2,000 and something. And also, I'm coming to you, Koliswa. When it's a good thing, the theory is very good to say, but in practice it's not there. Because the same councillors you're speaking about, that people, what committees, I'm elected by my councillors, they pick their friends, their relatives to sit in those committees. And I think it's only 10% of councillors who want to work with us as a NGOs. They don't like us because they don't want to challenge. And another thing that I always plea for, if you take this, what you are telling us now, and take it to the very same communities, and educate them before voting to elections, so that people know what are they voting for. Because if you do those voter education, it's very demotivating when you ask a person, what are you voting? And they say, I'm voting for IFP. I'm not asking why we are voting, but why do you have to vote? I have to elect a councillor, but what do you do? What does your councillor do? The MPS things we don't even know is NGOs are it. A person on the ground. These things are nice to be there, but implementation, guys, please, if you could do them before voting to the very same gogo who's living at an old age home. The only thing he knows is an aged home, and he doesn't know Amarites sitting there to an aged home. Thank you.
Yeah, kind of tough time. Yes. Round of applause, please. And then our final question.
Mine is very quickly. I just want to make a request first. All protocol observed. Because I won't be able to mention you all by your names.
Honorable yes.
Okay, one would like to make a request. One request that I think it's very important. When we gather like this in conferences, normally we've planned these conferences a while back, maybe 6 months, or a year sometimes. We already knew that we're going to have a conference of such kind. And we encourage community participation. But what we do is the opposite of what we're saying. Because if we're saying we encourage public participation, I would advise that if, like the presentation that you bring here to us on the day of the conference, because you already know who you've invited, why can't you send the presentations at least 2 weeks prior to the conference, so that people can start familiarizing themselves with the presentation, learning certain things, so that it gives them opportunity to engage accordingly. Because most of the presentations that you bring in these conferences, the vocabulary that you bring, it's just far away from the public. And then when they come here, it's more like we are being called to these conferences to observe and clap hands. Hence, you don't see change in the communities. Whether you go to government spaces, whether you go to corporate spaces, it is the same thing that is done throughout. I was privileged because I've said to a number of them, in different spheres. But this is the mistake that is done. Conferences are called and people are issued presentation on the day and yet are expected to engage. Don't we think if this presentation come prior, even if it means a month, people will go through them, whatever that they don't understand, they have time to go through dictionaries, even go to Google, search a bit, and familiarize themselves and prepare themselves.
We'll go to that. Thanks.
All right, okay. And on the other issue where Andile was referring to the money circulation thing, the money circulation story, it's not an easy one. Because no matter how we like in townships to do it, like how Andile is proposing that we need to identify maybe like church societies and so forth. But I'm afraid to say that without us start having our own value chains that we develop, we will never see money circulation. We will always attract other countries to come and give us what they have because we don't have ours. So it means I would propose again, because as someone who comes from a civil society also organization, I would propose that if we want to see it, let's say for South Africa, we have like 9 provinces, is it? But we keep on getting influx from overseas and so forth because we don't have our own. But all that we do best, we keep fighting each other unnecessarily. What if we can make it a point that we check throughout these 9 provinces which province is good at? If, let's say the Northwest, let's say Free State, because they're good in potatoes. If you go to Eastern Cape, they're good in maize meal. Then you come KZN, we are good maybe in poultry, we just say, for that matter.
Yeah, poultry
What
and
if,
livestock.
yes, what if we as South Africans ensure that these provinces start certain value chains differently? So if Free State gives us potatoes as KZN, they will be forced to buy our poultry because we also must buy from them potatoes, isn't it? The same thing applies to other provinces. That's how trading happens. So once it starts there by us building value chains, it is only then where we will be able to see money circulation. And apart from that, the jobs will then be created after that. Because remember, once you touch one thing in economy, it opens to another one. It opens an opportunity for another one. So once you have these value chains, you will attract, then there will be logistics that will be created, because to move these goods from that province and that province, because now we will be trading with each other. So then you will give an opportunity for logistics, same as branding and so forth. So do you really think that we won't be able to create jobs that we're crying about?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's just
a round of applause, please. Dr. Rajab and then Avin, just to close us off. I think it's on there. It might be. So we're going to. All right. Allow me. I'll remind you what the questions and comments were. As a moderator, I'll do better. Yes, sir.
No, I just wanted to say that we hear the last speaker and the others. And are you saying that maybe we should change the structure of our conferences? Make it more participatory, where we hear your voices. When we come, we don't know who's there. We don't know how you're thinking. And so we're leveling at that level, at that point. And what you're saying is the gap between you and what we're presenting is insurmountable. So we must hear you. And perhaps we need to reconsider how we're going to organize this to hear your voices more strongly. But we thank you for having the courage to come tell us what's happening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Oja. Since we are in party, Amin, to close us off on this round of comments.
Thank you, Brian. I was mulling whether I should speak or not. But basically, this is directed more to civil society directly. We sit here, we complain about the municipality not doing their part. But what are we doing to bridge the gap? I find there's too many excuses. I mean, if we take the Constitution, for example, we should know that Section 152, 2, 3, and 4 talks about participatory governance. Then you look at Chapter 4 of the Systems Act, it talks about participatory governance. Then you look at Section 55 of the Systems Act. Now it's clear that the city or municipal manager must be held accountable for any misdemeanors in the municipality. So why then does it become so difficult to hold anybody accountable? This is not rocket science, this is laws. We're expecting the municipality to engage in terms of empowering provisions and means its laws. But are we doing the same thing? We don't have our facts together. It's very convenient to point fingers. And then you've got the disciplinary regulations for senior managers, which was passed in 2010. Now, it's very broad in its application. It doesn't say who needs to initiate the process. So what's stopping us from saying, for instance, the municipal manager is not performing the duty and I'm now submitting for a disciplinary process and set your facts in. Then you look at Chapter 5, talks about integrated development program. And this is supposed to be done in conjunction with the local community. And if you look at local government, the definition of a municipality is a political component, the administration component, and the local community. Now, local community is further broken down into ratepayers, residents, civic organizations, non-governmental organizations, labor organizations. So it's broad in its definition. So where's the excuse? And I'm about to finish, nevertheless. So maybe perhaps the one question, in terms of decisions being taken without any participation from the local community, is that legally valid? And if not, what are the legal challenges? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Who would like to have a first bite for this one? I think your mic might have fallen slightly.
Oh.
There we go.
Thank you. I'd like to start with who being said, if I say it correctly. Firstly, with civil society, we act as the check and balance for government. Right? We are the ones that hold government accountable, and we can do that through via a series of things. We can take the state to court. We can use our Chapter 9 institution, which would be the Auditor General, which would be the South African Human Rights Commission. There's a series of things that we can do as well. I want us to understand that with local government, it's not an us against them. We need each other. So we need to now remove that idea of it is the citizens against the government, especially at local government, because we need each other. Local government is who is the closest sphere to the people, and the people need local government for service delivery and all these things. So once then we break that down and create a relationship where we understand that we need each other and we need to work together, and then we use healthy conflict resolution techniques to fix whatever problems that we are facing. You asked a very important question about how do we then, as civil society, hold state accountable when we ourselves sometimes do, rope things, shady things, right? Now that speaks to the culture of corruption, right? It's something we have to address in our communities, and because it's not just at civil society level, it goes right into communities. I mean, if just random question, if I was to say, how many people actually got their license correctly? How many people have been stopped by a cop and the brake light is not working, and instead of getting a ticket, they paid code payment? It's a culture of corruption that we need to address first before trying to say, all right, society is not doing this. And we also have to understand the dynamics that build into this. At the end of the day, if someone is going to say, look, I am an unemployed graduate, I don't have a job, and the little that I'm taking from my organization is what I'm using to feed my family, then we need to unpack the unemployment issue. We need to understand how all these things are intertwined, and it's not just corruption there, but there are layers to it, and how do we address it so that civil society is functioning well, and they understand corruption, and then they can hold the state accountable for whatever corruption is happening. So it is a multidimensional issue. I hope I've answered your question well. And then there was the question of, in theory it's good, in practice it's not as good. There was an example of the school and how the ward committees. But then for us to impact change, we need to be in the spaces. We cannot have influence or vote when we are not part. If you're not part of the governing body, then you cannot vote for structures to be built in the school. If you're not part of your ward committee, then you cannot make submissions on what needs to be prioritized. I'm not sitting here and saying there are no issues. There are issues, but we need to find ways around it, because these spaces are taking decisions for us, that affect our kids. And as Mr. Bola said, yes, we can make excuses, but we need to try to find ways around it. And that's where the element of healthy conflict resolution techniques comes in. How do we say that we are one with each other? Because at the end of the day, we do need each other. I think then we need some points that I'm going to try.
Let's start with the critique on professionals. Look, I'm sure there are people here who are married, right? It's simple, I hope your name. I'll talk it simple, always academic. There is no marriage that happens today without some boy and some girl sitting down and talking about what they want from each other. So if ever you're thinking about the issue of flow of money, it just requires a conversation and some commitments you can make to each other, and processes of actually engaging that commitment over a period. I know you think it's complicated, but it's not. It's as simple as a girl saying, yes, I'll marry you. You're saying to something she doesn't know. No, girls, imagine, you're saying no to something you don't know. Maybe there's an infant in a car, you don't know, but you say yes. And one day you discover, hey, they do witchcraft. I'm trying to say to you, some of you here have issues of mistrust, that there's no conversation happening. There are no conversation happening around your own table. Your table, your dinner table, not the councillor's one, not the guy who's rich around your area. I'm talking about your neighbors when they end of the year, there are bonuses. And all of you are going to buy groceries for 4,000. Imagine you calling a tea, whatever, with scones, with all these mamas that you usually go to funerals with, and say, mamas, we want to have like 5,000 each in December. Can we think of where we're going to spend this money? Most of you are afraid of sitting on the table and begin to put an agenda together for your own neighborhood. Professionals as you are, you learn in school how to write an agenda, you can chair a meeting and work, but you can't chair a meeting with your neighbors to talk about the future of your area. So don't tell me stories about professionals this. I'm sorry to be harsh maybe. I live in communities that work day in, day out.
Maybe let me help.
Yeah.
Our colleagues this side, because I'm in that. On the question of professionals and businesses, so business owners don't live in the communities that they are creating economic sort of value chain in. So how do you make them plow back money? How do we know who makes wins and every weekend? How do we know all of those butcheries that are in Mlazi actually provide value to communities? Yeah,
I think it should go to Max's place. The money mustn't go to Max's place. We need to sit around the table and decide where does the money go. The problem is that you still want to take it to Max. You still want to go to the mall. I know that's the challenge, but let me leave it with you. But we have to decide a new way where we spend money and why we spend it and how we benefit if we spend the money there. I know it's difficult because it means you. Let me make an example. I once went. Most people think Woolworths are the same. The Woolworths in Plaza is very bad. It's very bad. You understand? But I'm just going to leave you there to say we need to kind of have decision-making power around where we spend and create entities where we can spend. We've done that in Kamandi where we're doing groceries in the area. So you can actually do it yourself. Now, another issue was most of us here are very lazy in organizing communities. Now, I know, wait, hear me out. I used to be a cost accountant by background. So I have the privilege of not even leaving Nula as if I would just decide to go back to accounting space. Some of us, from where I stand, is that you need to kind of be like your mom. Your mom used to have a stock fair. You know, there used to be ladies gathering every month at your house when you grew up. You, not even all your friends with degrees come to your house for a conversation around where you're going together. So I'm trying to say some of these economic issues and these problems we're talking about have to do with our energy of organizing our own communities around same values. Like we complain about professionals' values. Values are discussed around the table. That today we are deciding that we're not going to be hateful toward each other. We agree, then we walk that way. So for me, that's what I'm saying. Sometimes we can point fingers somewhere. And I'm saying the solution is around your table with your friends, starting a conversation around the things that you're concerned about. Maybe the last issue is talk about, because there are so many things that people say. Oh yeah, gradually. Most of us here, like the example of starting, I'm not criticizing, I'm saying you can't start at a provincial level on these issues. You need to start very, very close. You need to start in your 10 houses around the place. Support each other in buying things. Don't build too big. Build small. Then gradually begin to invite people into this process of yours. That is building trust. Because trust is an asset. Once that asset is gone in communities, nothing can be built. So trust, integrity, accountability, those are assets. It's just that those assets are intangible. When they are lost, things don't move. But whenever we think of it, we don't want to build these assets. No one wants to build trust. No one wants to build integrity. No one wants to build responsibilities and assets. You know, whenever you want to do something significant in the community, you look for the responsible guy, right? So it's an asset. The question is, what processes are we having in place in our communities to build these assets? And they're not built by workshops, I'm sorry. They are built by processes, me and you, working together, me sometimes lying to that I love you. And then you keep me accountable and say you're lying. And then we begin to say, okay, I won't lie anymore. Then we begin to journey. Meaning trust is built through things that we experience, not through a training. So some of the assets here that we don't talk about are significant in us making that change, making our one communities work. But if you check if we're building those assets, I'd rather lock myself in my house, drive my own car, go to work, and mind my own business. And trust is gone, accountability is gone, integrity is gone, no one cares about anybody. So these assets are taken lightly, but they're the critical part of what we're talking about here. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we bring in this one, Tamsin, once more, can I maybe a follow-up? When you're working with area-based management, which is a unit of a Ethekwini municipality, how are you building trust and integrity in the relationships that you're forming with them as an organization that works in the township, that's mobilizing other CSOs and engaging with a municipal unit that's meant to be utilizing its skills, its capacity to work in order to advantage those communities that you work with? They have a budget, they have capacity because they're employing people, but ultimately, how much of that work and load are you carrying as an organization versus what they are carrying?
Where we are now, we're at a dating level with them.
We're just making
everybody know. I'm being honest, we're at a level where we say, hey, this is our friend. We like him. And our friend can keep councillors, can keep officials accountable. Our friend has access to the municipal manager. So if ever something is not done, tell our friend. Our friend is going to send someone to check. So for now, that's where we are. And we're not going to ask them to give them more than what we think is there. So it's an introductory level and making the community aware. Who is ABM? What do they do? And how can the community engage ABM? So that's where we are. That's why we took them to every ward to come and talk to people and say, tell them who you are. Like introducing the girlfriend to the family. In a way. That's where we are for now.
No, I hear you. I think that's an important undertaking, given that quite often there's a perception that the relationship between government and CSOs is adversarial in nature, that we become each other's enemies, and if I bring in a CSO, they're going to be angry and they're going to buzz on 10, essentially. They're going to bark at me, as opposed to engaging with me in a way that's cordial. So the establishment of that initial relationship is important for the type of work that you want to be able to do together. Yeah? So thank you very much for that. Oliswa, your comment, and then I'll go to Tamsin for her inputs as well.
Oh, thank you very much, Brian. Mr. Bolo asked a question on public participation.
Yes, if you can bring your mic closer, sorry. Yeah, there we go.
There we go, thank you. There was a question on public participation. and what to do when decisions are being taken without public participation. Yes, we are aware that we've had public participation happen as kickboxing, where it's just done, but the comments and the activities are not really, there's no impact. However, then the responsibility lies on us as those who participated to follow up. Look, I committed on this, how far are you on this? Because you have a right to do that. It is your right to participate, and they have a duty to ensure that your comment and whatever activity that happened with regards to the public participation process that took place, they have a duty there to follow through with it. So it is then your right, your responsibility again, whether as an individual or member of civil society, to follow through. That I attended this meeting, this was the vote, this is how we felt, what decision was taken, how many people voted this, how did you consider things that we said. So we also have that responsibility to do that, because sometimes we will sit, we will participate and vote, and then it's there. If we don't follow through those comments that we made or whatever voting process we were part of, will just be put on the side. So we have to engage that. And then there was the comment of bringing it down to the community. When we have conferences and workshops, the hope is that the civil society members that are here are going to take whatever information and bring them back to their communities.
Yeah.
And when we have workshops, especially capacity buildings, that's why we have like leaders of CSOs and community leaders, with the hope that they are going to take that information, share it back to their communities. And again, we also have workshops and capacity building in different communities. So it does not just end here with DDP, it does not just end in this space, but our networks, and as I said earlier on, there are familiar faces who we've worked with throughout the year, and we've been able to measure impact of the work that we've been doing. So it does spread down to grassroots level, but however, there is an expectation that when we gather here, we will take it back.
Thank you very much. So there's a replicating effect that you hope will happen. Whether it happens or not is another story. So it is directed at you specifically, but what have you picked up from the engagement that has been happening? Specifically also potentially that's going to help to think about how do we locate our role as a collective in mobilizing towards more sustainable and actually genuinely effective impacts in particular. I think people don't know that they can walk into council and actually listen to the proceedings of council. People don't know that they have access to the minutes of what council resolutions look like. And ultimately the opportunity to object exists still. In Durban, for instance, when the economic roadshows were happening after the IDP process, there was a group of ratepayers. They said, we're not going to allow this to pass because there's certain elements that we ourselves have not contributed to, or people that live in our area have not contributed to. And that process was stopped from the municipality side because the power collectively was available. But if we don't engage, if we just choose to let it go, then certain things will not happen in our favor because we've chosen to just not participate in that space. Maybe a comment on that, please.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think that's very valid. I think people aren't exercising those opportunities sufficiently. But again, I think this conversation has raised a number of concerns, and I wonder if it isn't somehow going right back and really asking communities about how these systems are really functioning, and are they bought into by the community, in fact? Because it seems there is a very big disconnect. And I think it speaks to part of the question that was, or the comment that was made about, and apologies if sometimes the language that we use is because it's about the topic that we're talking about, so there's sort of language associated, and that tends to be very alienating.
Yes.
So I think that there is probably a need to rethink some of these processes through great engagement with communities, so that they can actually become more embedded in the ways that people in fact operate and how and where they engage. So perhaps that's part of a deeper conversation that needs to be had. Do these impacts, and it's it's a very alienating concept, very alienating term.
All the acronyms and the jargon.
Yeah, so, perhaps this is where some of the root of the problem is. so like we have in Bizo and other things, maybe there's more of a need to relook at the institutions and are they actually delivering. I think one of the very important comments that was made, I mean, the economic question I think has been discussed and I think it's very valid. How do we regenerate and grow the smaller towns and places so that people actually really are part of the solution to building and addressing some of the problems. But I think there is also a responsibility on civil society as with this, and the point was made. I mean, we keep pointing fingers at government, but perhaps we need to look at ourselves more carefully as well. And just as Plan Act, we do a lot of, I won't use the word civic engagement because of civic training, because that's also, but really orienting people around how local government does work. What is it? How is it made up? How is it comprised? What are these processes? What are these laws? And just helping people to really navigate these spaces so that they can be more actively involved. I know that the IDPs are also not performing as well as they should, but they are also a space, and I think that they offer an opportunity. Maybe I'll stop there.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your comments. Is there anyone else on the panel that wants to address something quickly? Yeah. Sure, on IDPs.
So part of our mapping has to do with kind of innovatively equipping the community to engage the IDP process better. So hoping in the future that after we've mapped, I think we've mapped the NPOs and the other organizations, we'll be mapping some other problems in communities and leave that and make that resource available to our committees, war rooms and all that, and also activists in communities, so that they can have their own IDP process without the official. So by the time the official comes, they've had their own engagement about what is the priority in our space. Now it's a long journey that Ranyana is ambitious about, and we're doing it in 30 spaces now. But it's a thought we have to say, how about if we know the IDP is coming in June, how about we as Ranyana begin to do exercises in January and equip the community, not just how to talk, but on real issues on the ground, that when they go to those meetings, they have a document. They can speak to the IDP, because something I think, and to make an example, they call an IDP of Umlaz in Ezwelitini Stadium, Kingswood. I always think it's patronized. I always think our councillors don't respect us.
How many wards are there in Lazi?
It's going to be 13 wards in there. Imagine, in Kingswood Stadium, I'm going to discuss this. Total disrespect. I mean, professionals are all not going to go there. And it's happening during the day. All the ratepayers of Umlas are not there. Only maybe the go-go's and the pensioners are there. And I was thinking, and they bring the mayor. So I'm just saying, sometimes, yeah, I have many things with government, so let's hold it there. I'm just saying, we're going to be equipping communities so that when the IDP process comes, our hope is that the community has something in their hands. When they lift up their hands, they have stats, data, and proposals that can actually say, we don't want that, we want this thing.
Cool. Thank you very much. I'm going to take another round of hands, and I hope that it's people that haven't spoken yet. So, Auntie Jenny, one. Anyone else? Okay, we'll just stick to Auntie Jenny. No. We'll stick to Auntie Jenny for now.
Good afternoon, everyone. So, if we were not so sure about what we're doing in communities, we'd leave here really, really despondent. But because we are, I almost said the ground force, but because we are busy doing what we are doing, we know that it's true to say that more can be done. But I think it's equally true to say that communities are doing the best they can. And I think rather than talking about what we're not doing, that maybe in designing these conferences, we can talk about what we can be doing as civil society parallel to what the municipality is doing. So we know that there are community-based planning processes. We know there are ward committees. We know there's the IDP. But for the longest time, we've been trying to engage with these processes, and we have not had a lot of joy. Personally, from our organization, we've been part of Budget Watch, and we've been part of the KZN network. And I think we've done a lot of work to journey with local government in making sure that our communities receive the service delivery that they need. But it's not happening. Every time you want something, you've got to put on a fight. And I'd like to be part of a conversation that says, at which part are we losing the fight? At which part are we losing the fight? So we stand up, we're saying what needs to be said, we're calling on the municipal managers, we're calling on the people we know inside, we're talking to everybody. We're talking to ABM, we're talking to the mayor's office, we're talking to everybody. And people just don't do what they don't want to do for communities. So we are the people who can ensure that when we lodge something with the Public Protector's Office, that it gets attention now rather than 6 months later. We are the people who can help us to litigate with costs, because that's what we don't have. We are the people who can help us to set up our own community-based planning spaces, our own IEP, and then we submit those against what the municipality is doing. So these are some of the things that I'm sure that if we engaged people involved at community level, we'd get a much richer idea of what can be done, what needs to be done, because God help me, we're doing a lot already.
And at this board, not on this board, okay? Any other comments before we close off? We have about 5 minutes remaining. Just final remarks, please, and then we'll wrap up.
Thank you for that comment, ma'am. We are not disputing that civil society members are doing a lot. We are here because civil society is working. And we're not disputing that our systems are messed up. We're not disputing that local government sometimes messes up more often than not. In these conversations, we need to find ways, as has been said, to break the lingo. Because as I said earlier on, I don't think people are just sitting at home and not participating because they don't care. But there's that, it feels far-fetched because of the lingo used. We can use the IDP example. If we're going to take someone in grade 8 or who ended school grade 2, understanding the English used there, if we didn't do English home language, becomes a bit of a barrier. So now we need to then sit in such circles and say, let's have the Ranyaka Trust go to communities and explain what an IDP is and what and how it works and what this chapter means, so that the community understands. Let's have the Oliswas, who's in Kwamakut and is also a legal practitioner, say, all right, for litigation to happen, this is the proper procedure. Because what's happening, we have local government, they know the processes. So when we act as community members, sometimes we don't follow proper procedure, and that's why our efforts just fall. And they're not recognized because we did not follow proper procedure. And that's why when you contact your city manager, they'll ask, did you lodge, do you have a reference number? And because you didn't follow proper procedure, then it's dismissed automatically. But if you follow proper procedure, then we can take it up. Then if you want to go up to litigation, you can now go to, there's UKZN law school that assists with litigation for free. There's pro bono, there are so many other organizations that provide free legal services and are willing to go as far as the High Court. But we need people to know of such things. So when we sit in such spaces, we are hoping that when we share such information, even in workshops where we share such information, we are hoping that you are taking it back to your communities. And then also coming back to say, at the end of the day, it's not us as the panel taking decisions, but we need input. We need to find out what's happening in the community so we can assist fairly. So we can give guidance as to, okay, try this approach, try this approach. I think that is how I'll close it off.
Thank you very much, Adina.
For me, I just want to appreciate this, Brian. I think last comment from us as Ranyanga is that we, like I said, we are in your neighborhood. We want to be your neighbor. We want to work with you in the various issues in your space. And if ever you come across us or you engage us, we'll probably make an attempt to actually make ourselves available to see what kind, because we are a town planning agency. I think 5 of our team is town planners. You know, so, and we don't have a lawyer yet. We're hoping for one in future, maybe. I don't know. Most of us volunteer, so I feel for you. I feel for you if you want to work for. But so please engage us. Andy Jenny, please engage us. Let's see what kind of journey we can start. And let's understand, if you want to make a very big difference, let it be slow. I just want to ask, let it be very slow. I used to be, when I arrived to this thing, I was, hey, energy. Today, very slow.
Guys, okay, I hear you, right? I hear you. Some people in the room have been at this for 20 to 30 years, right? And so they've been slow for 20 to 30 years.
No.
The time is running out, literally on the...
Hear me well, Brian, hear me well.
Yeah.
Hear me well. Let me make an example. There are certain solution or innovations that are not available as yet until someone new comes up.
Okay.
No matter how much you try with your energy, until that friendship or that relationship shows up, you will fail. So rather begin to spend energy building relationships, getting these lawyers close, getting these resource people close. By the time they are close, you've worked on that. It seems slow to build relationships because sometimes I don't pick up your call. Sometimes I don't answer your WhatsApp for 3 days. But my point is that relationships makes you move far effective than the energy you exhaust by yourself. So when I say slow, I mean spend more time looking for the people you need. So that when you're sitting around the table now, the speed is not even yours. The speed is theirs. I'm talking about something I've seen for myself. There are things I don't do anymore because there are people who are better than me. Better. And I've agreed that they are better, and I always applaud them. Because but I keep them on my table. So whenever I'm having 1,000 meetings, or even agreeing to come in here, I know what I'm here for. I'm looking for some relationships, so I can move faster. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Terms your final remarks, and as we thank you for coming all the way from Waindomazaduma, as they call it here, at Johannesburg.
I think just my final point would just be to talk about multi-stakeholder partnerships and just, I think the importance of really orienting communities so that they can build their engagement with local government and getting stakeholders around the table. Because very often that works most effectively. We're doing that in Tshwane, and we've got C40 involved and Madam Waste and various other players. And so I think just building those partnerships towards solution building.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
A round of applause for our panel. And then a round of applause for yourselves. I think it's fair to say, as Auntie Jenny was saying, some of the things that we talk about often don't make us feel like, it makes us feel hopeless. It makes us feel like, what's the point of all of this? And ultimately, we hope that at least in some respects, you can start to build those partnerships, those networks that will move you one step further. That with the information that you're able to get here, you can find resources and outlets for you to pour that information into. That replicating effect does start to happen. In the course of our work, we want to also mention that we lose people along the way, and so it's important that we try and keep those legacies alive. For DDP, sadly, we lost a very long time friend, colleague, daughter of the organization, Unonhlanze Ugamede, last month. And so we we were very disheartened and we were very sad and shocked. She unfortunately had fallen ill, but it did take her quite quickly. So for those of you who are familiar with her, have had a relationship with DDP for longer than probably 10 years, because I think she only left DDP in 2018, 2019, 2017. We do have a commitment from the organization to say we'll continue to contribute to her legacy as well. So there are resources that we'll be making available to her young daughter of 4 years old going forward. But ultimately we have a book. What's the book called? I don't know these things. Condolences book. Yes, a condolences book that's available. Please, as you go to lunch, as you are around, if you don't find time here, you can even go to the offices and just fill in your thoughts and memories and contributions. We think it's important that as some traditional processes will be happening, that we continue to remember them. So we hope that you can help us in making sure that that legacy is kept alive. So I apologize for ending on this note, but it was important that we also remember her in the work that we continue. As a lot of us, myself included, came into DDP and found her there. And so it was her smile, her joy, her love for this work that also helped us fall in love with the organization and its work. And of course, some of you whom we love very much, but maybe some of you are newer, so we don't know you enough to love you yet. But hopefully you can stick around. So hopefully you can stick around. See, we're stitching around. So we laugh and we cry together, guys. So thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you for participating. Thank you to our panel. Thank you to the Auditor General's office. Thank you to the chairperson of SCOPA. Thank you to our board for all of your contributions to the organization as well, and the rest of the team. There are tickets for lunch, coupons rather. Please make sure you grab those before you head to lunch. Lunch is in the Panini restaurant, which is on the same level as the tea area that we had today. Thank you very much, and travel safe. Thank you.